Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to Best Practices in Starting an Autism Social Enterprise. We're super excited to host this webinar for you all today and talk about some of the best practices you can do in starting and thinking through and testing and actually operating your autism social enterprise. At a high level, we're going to take you through what we call the autism entrepreneur's journey, and we're going to talk through some key things that you can do and think about as you're going along your own journey. First, a little bit about us. My name's Tom Senna, and I'm the CFO of Rising Tide Car Wash and Rising Tide U.
And I'm Tom Dieri. I'm the co-founder and COO of Rising Tide Car Wash.
And this webinar today is brought to you by Rising Tide U. It's an entity of Rising Tide Car Wash, focused on inspiring and sharing with others what we've learned from running and creating Rising Tide Car Wash, as well as UM-NSU Card, an organization that supports and assists those with autism through the lifespan with a goal of maximizing their potential. So our teams have been collaborating to run this series of live workshops and these webinar sessions for you. To build community and to inspire parents, self-advocates, and service providers to start businesses focused on employing individuals with autism. And we've got great feedback. We're doing our slower here.
How much do we end up not really paying anything, right? To upgrade the game.
All right, sorry about the technical issues there. Can everybody hear us now? Just write in the chat box there. All right. Apologies for this. All right. Moving right along here. We've gotten really good feedback from the workshops we've done. We've gotten some good feedback from the webinars we've done. We wanted today kind of talk about high level, some of the best practices you can do. Some of the topics that we've done here we've covered in previous workshops, but we think this is a really great overview as far as overall best practices you can do at each step of the way throughout your journey. And we do have some new additional content as well here. We're pretty excited to go through it with you. So a little bit about the agenda today. We're going to talk through the autism entrepreneur's journey, and we're going to talk through it in the context of a few entrepreneurs who have done it before. We're going to talk about the inspiration and the reasons why these entrepreneurs started, and we're going to see how aligned that can be with your reasons for wanting to start as well. We'll talk about the different approaches to choosing a business operation, choosing a business idea, and if you're still at that stage, ways that you can think through that. We'll talk about how to take action using small tests and how to get the right people on your team. And finally, we'll talk about actually operating and some of the really key best practices you can do when you're actually operating your business. So to dive right in, this is the entrepreneur's journey timeline that we're going to talk through. So each step of the way, we have a few different best practices that we want to go through with you. We're going to talk about the why for starting, how to approach that idea or a business. We'll talk through the actual idea and how to vet whether that's a good opportunity for you in your community or in your market. We'll talk about taking action, and then we'll talk about day-to-day how to ensure that your social enterprise is set up for success. So we'll dive right in here.
So first we want to introduce some other entrepreneurs besides just us at Rising Tide Car Wash. There's some really great people out there doing excellent work. Ray and Dave here are two of them, but there are plenty more. And in fact, launching in November, we'll be showcasing a series of entrepreneurs through our Autism Advantage podcast. So watch out for notifications on that. We should be beginning to promote that in the next week or so, and we should actually be launching that sometime in November. But that showcases a bunch of other entrepreneurs too, so you can learn their stories as well. But here on this slide, you can see Ray Steffi, who along with his son Joe, founded Popping Joe's Kettle Corn. Ray, not an entrepreneur by background. In fact, he was a farmer for a long time. At the age of 63, he saw that his son Joe was not going to be able to lead the life that he believed he was capable of unless he intervened. He had a meeting with the school system, essentially saying that Joe was not going to be able to do much with his adult life outside of living in a group home, and Ray didn't agree with that. So he was actively looking for alternatives, and as things just kind of happen sometimes in life, he was on vacation in Alaska, and he went to a farmer's market, and all of a sudden, bam, he saw that there was this one stand that was doing way better business than everybody else's, and it was a kettle corn stand. They had a long line, and people really seemed to like the product, and he had never seen that in his home area of Kansas City. So he said, okay, let me see if I can bring this to Kansas City. He did some really great, actually natural entrepreneurial things. Even though he didn't have the background for it, he had some great gut instincts, and his first was to try to find help. Who knows how to do this? So he was able to get in touch with the vendor who was doing it in Alaska. They eventually connected him with somebody in Minnesota, who then connected him with someone locally in Kansas City, and the local vendor in Kansas City sold him some used equipment, taught him a little bit about how to operate it, and gave him a list of different places that he could potentially set up shop at. And without really knowing if Joe is going to be able to do it or if Joe is going to like it or having, any real data to suggest that he would, that Joe would in fact take to this. He said he wanted to just try it. So they set up in front of a grocery store for the weekend, and lo and behold, they did $700 worth of business, and Joe really liked it. He really liked, showboating as far as making the popcorn, really enjoyed handing a product to customers that they really liked, and that's how it started, and it became Pop & Joe's Kettle Corn, and today it provides a really good livelihood for Joe and several other family members. Dave's story is a little bit different in that Dave came from a business background. He was the chief marketing officer at Sears, and before that he was a marketing executive at Razorfish, which is a very large marketing firm. What he found in his work at both of those places was that there was a lot of entry-level stuff that marketing interns and entry-level marketing employees were needing to do that they did not really like to do. And because they didn't really like to do it, they weren't necessarily doing the best job at it. And that was stuff around data entry, website maintenance, data analysis, and database management. And he said, hey, I think my son could do this. And not only could he do it, I bet you he'd really like it. And I bet you a lot of his friends would be really, really good at this too. So he took his experience in the marketing industry and found a friend who was also a chief marketing officer to give him a shot and to do a prototype. It worked really well. They quickly expanded to 3 different clients that first year, and now today I think they're employing around 20 people, and they have a bunch of clients, and they're in the Chicago area, and they're a great business to take a look at. And then you see my dad here, John Dieri, who's our CEO, and for those, I'm assuming most of you are relatively familiar with our story, so I'll say it quickly, but essentially we saw that my brother Andrew wasn't going to have the opportunities that he was capable of unless we took action, and we thought the car wash industry was great because a lot of the initial research that we did suggested most of the issues around employing individuals with autism have to do with the fact that we look at autism as a society, and we look at it as a disability that requires sympathy instead of a valuable diversity, and we wanted to build a consumer-facing business that could potentially change that mentality, that was really well structured, really well big and bold, and the car wash was a great fit. So we went and took action from there. And one thing that we really want to emphasize when we're talking about messaging, so this is as far as one of the most important things that a startup leader can do is be able to recruit allies and other people that want to get on their bandwagon and want to be part of their movement. And the why is why people get involved with that stuff. So anywhere from great leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. To Steve Jobs at Apple, and the whole gamut, people who can really get other high-quality people on their team generally can really articulate why they're doing something. So very few organizations do this, though. Most organizations start with what they do, right? So I run a car wash, and I do it by employing people with autism because my brother has autism. That's one way to say it. That's not that inspiring, right? I kind of led with the wrong thing. But leading with, here's our example here, that we believe in showing the world that autism is a valuable diversity in the workforce and is not a disability. And we do this by hiring individuals with autism for 80% of our staff and empowering them through intensive training and team building and a culture dedicated to our mission. And the output of that is that we're a world-class car wash that's staffed with the best people with autism. A little bit more inspiring, a lot easier to get people on board with messaging like that. And I challenge you as you think through this. This is a great model. It's called the the golden circle. And Simon Sinek has a great TED Talk on it and a great book called Start With Why if you're interested in this more. And it's a really good way to think about what we're doing here and using this framework. And specifically, we want to make sure that even though we're starting with our mission, we're really focusing on the capability. So we're always going to want to use strength-based language, even though we could have started with we're here to address the autism unemployment epidemic where 90% of individuals with autism are unemployed. We could have started with that very easily. However, that paints a negative message. It's that subtly says that people with autism aren't good enough to be employed because the social norm is that they're not employed, obviously. But that's not the message that we're trying to say. We're trying to say that this is an overlooked group of people that are extremely valuable in the workforce, and we're here to prove that. So when you're talking about your mission, using the strengths, how capable people with autism are, and very, very rarely, if ever, talking about the negatives is really important here.
That's right, and making sure that as you're initially starting out, and you're thinking about doing this type of thing, understanding why exactly you're doing it. Making sure you're really aligned with, your purpose for doing it, your purpose for being here, your purpose for starting a business, and committing, time, energy, and resources to doing this type of thing. It can be a great thing to fall back on and to really reflect on when things can get challenging and when you're starting to go through trials and tribulations, as we all do when we're starting a business. It can be a really powerful thing to remind yourself this is why I'm here, this is my purpose for my organization existing, etc. So we're still talking in the context of the three different entrepreneurs that Tom had highlighted before, and we're going to talk about the different approaches they took to choosing that business idea. And Tom did give a really good summary of it a little bit earlier. But with Pop and Joe's Kettle Corn, essentially what happened was Ray had gone on a trip to Alaska, and he thought he recognized at a farmer's market in Alaska, that the busiest line was this kettle corn line. And he found that, hey, look, I don't know what this is. It doesn't exist in Kansas, and it might be a cool thing to do in Kansas that, Joe might like and Joe can do. So he did that. He identified something outside of his community that could be potentially a really powerful, opportunity back in Kansas. And the way that he went through it, the way he approached starting this up, wasn't going out and buying a whole load of the best equipment. He went and he made a few phone calls where he called the owner of that one kettle corn stand, who put him in contact with a local kettle corn owner, closer to him, and he found out a little bit more about it. He tested his idea by first setting up a stand outside a grocery store, and as Tom pointed out earlier, they made $700 that first weekend. So one, the demand was there in their community, and Joe enjoyed it. He was able to do it. He thrived in that stand environment. And we want to kind of point out here too that there's different ways that you can start with as far as capital goes as well. So depending on who you're looking to employ and how many people you're looking to employ and the potential impact that you want to have, you can start up a business for relatively low amount of money, and especially at the onset, we really recommend that through testing. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but with Pop and Joe's, what they did was they started with $4,000 they committed to the business and personal funds, and they were able to get a $20,000 VR grant to get up off the ground, and now it provides a good sustainable financial engine to provide for Joe, and they're actually Ray is bringing on his grandson on board as well, and we're going to talk about generational planning in a little bit, but he's coming on board as well because the business is doing well. With Dave, we have a little bit of a different approach that he took. Tom pointed out earlier that he was the chief marketing officer at Sears. His background was in marketing for years and years, and he noticed that there was a problem in his work where there wasn't engaging work for interns and entry-level staff, where they weren't excited, they weren't pumped to be doing this entry-level data input work. And he's like, hey, look, this might be a problem that can be solved by individuals with autism. From what I understand, they're good at repetitive tasks, and they pay attention to detail, etc. And he went ahead and he tested that idea out, with 3 clients that he knew at other local businesses who were friends with some entry-level employees, with initial employees that had autism. And he found out that it worked. He found out that they were able to do the work, they were able to do it well, they enjoyed doing the work. And he said, hey, I think this business has legs. The startup capital that he started with, it was a little bit different. He committed a little bit more funds to find out if this process was going to work, and he, I believe now, is employing 5 to 8 employees with autism currently. And with John and Tom, when they started Rising Tide Car Wash, they found an existing business in their community. So John went to a local car wash in his community, and he said, I think Andrew can do this. This looks like something that can make money, and it seems like there might be some real advantages to employing individuals with autism here over the typical labor pool that works at a car wash. So the way that they started that up and tested it was they had a proof of concept that they did down in Homestead, Florida, at an existing car wash. So they didn't go ahead and spend a whole lot of money with starting that up and going and purchasing a wash before they knew whether this thing could work, whether people with autism could do the job, do it well, whether it was going to be whether the customers would react in a certain way to hiring this labor pool and hiring and the social mission there. And the startup capital, once the decision was made that this was viable and this could work, they went ahead and purchased an existing location. And the startup capital, you can see there, is a little bit more significant, as we currently we have employed right now 35 individuals on the spectrum. So a little bit more funds were used there to get off the ground. I want to talk about now. So we went through the approach to thinking through a business idea. What we do at a lot of times at our workshops is brainstorm any and every idea that we can think of to employ individuals with autism. We think of a lot of different businesses, a lot of different tasks that individuals with autism could be successful doing. And I wanted to call that out here and kind of show you a little bit of how we go about this. So we think through much the same way with the different approaches that our entrepreneurs took. We're thinking through businesses in our community that someone with autism can work in. We think through businesses outside the community, same thing. And any problems at work where you have experience, where you've been working for a number of years, any problems that you think can be solved by someone with autism. If there's a specific role you can think of that has high turnover or isn't engaging work, that type of thing, maybe that's something that can be solved by somebody with autism. And I wanted to show you guys here that we've taken those sticky notes from all of the different workshops that we've done, and we're compiling a large list of all the different ideas. And what we found was the most frequent ideas that came up, and a lot of the ones that we saw over and over again. So out of 750 plus ideas, these are the ones that came up most frequently. These are the ones that our participants at the workshop thought might, be real solutions, real businesses that can be, we can employ individuals with autism. So we have bakeries and coffee shops, landscaping, dog walking, pet grooming. Those are very popular ones that we receive, and you can see as the list goes on. So not only, are we trying to think about different market opportunities in our own market and, the like, but we want to also harness the traits that individuals with autism have that can make the business be, or we can have a real competitive advantage in hiring this population. This is a graphic that we show at all of our workshops, and we talk about it a lot in our webinars as well, because it really is one of the most important things we feel, that we want to create real competitive advantages to hiring individuals with autism in existing businesses that are proven. So these are just some of the advantages that we've seen at our own WASH, and that we've heard of other autism social enterprises seeing. So things like having very low turnover. Our WASH typically turns about 30% of our staff a year, when most car washes turn 100 to 250% of their staff a year. That can be a big cost as far as hiring new employees and committing time to training and things like that. Here we have people who are interested in staying, who are interested in learning more, and it yields a better quality product that we can put out because our employees stay. So it really is an advantage for us. And you can see a lot of the other ones that we have too. We have an incredible safety record because our employees follow our safety procedures to the letter. We haven't had to have a big advertising spend. We virtually have zero advertising spend when most car washes do, because our mission is a real behavior change tool, and we get a lot of earned media from our mission as well. So, instead of getting new people in the door through things like deep discounts and advertising, we are able to get people in the door just because they hear about their mission on TV or social media, and say, oh, hey, that's a real cool thing. You get people in the door because they just want to try it, and they'll try it because of the mission, but they stay because of the quality of our product and service. So that's something to think about too, as you're thinking through and starting your own social enterprises. Think through a lot of the different advantages you can have to employing this population. So to just kind of recap the approach and that idea phase as we're thinking through that autism entrepreneur's journey, we want to think through businesses that we can structure, that the processes can be concrete, and hammering this point home again, that we can have real competitive advantages to hiring individuals with autism. One of the things that we like to talk about too is, we're not talking about businesses like creating the next Google or the new hot tech startup. We're thinking about choosing existing businesses that have proven track records. What we mean by that is, with the car wash, there's 19,000 car washes in the United States. They work. The business model actually works. There's a lot of them. They're financed. They're easily financed by a lot of banks. So this is something we're choosing, something that's proven, that we can make autism a fit for within that model. And we're going to think through that as we go through the rest of the slides. And again, thinking through businesses that are going to be a good fit in our community. So because this car wash works here in South Florida, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work in Seattle, Washington. We want to think through, the area, the location. We want to think through a lot of these different things in a real business sense to see if it's going to be an opportunity in our area as well. So now we're going to go through and talk about launching. So you went through your, as we're going along this journey, we thought about our idea. We're thinking through whether it's going to be a good fit or not. What we want to do is have small tests to essentially learn as much as we can about whether autism would be a fit and whether it's going to be a good community fit, without spending time, energy, and resources as much as possible. So what we want to do is things that we're assuming about the business, we want to basically get out of the building and test it live with real customers. We want to think through ways that we can do that. So we turn those assumptions into actual learnings. And we want to start small and fail fast. And what that means is, not committing time, energy, and resources, and finding out as much as we can, as quickly as we can, about whatever assumption we have, whatever the assumption is that we have. And what we're doing in doing that is we're reducing our risk, because we're turning things that we don't know into things that we'll actually know. You want to talk about this here?
Yeah, and for most of us, we're going to find two different types of assumptions that we'll all face. And the first type is the autism fit. Does this business work for your loved one with autism? Meaning, can they do the job and meet industry standards, and will they like it? I think that in the autism community in general, we tend to hone in on the specific interests that our loved ones either vocalize or show really clearly that they like that. However, as I think all of us can draw from in our own lives, generally interest comes from experience. And it's really hard to know what we're going to like and what our life passions are until we go out and experience things. For me personally, I had no idea that the car wash was going to be something I was passionate about. Never really thought about myself entering the car wash industry. Was never a lifelong dream, and no, really it wasn't for anybody on our team. But we saw it as an opportunity, and we went out and decided to try it. And lo and behold, I for one really enjoy the industry. Would have never known that, and I think that that's the same for a lot of our loved ones. So by doing a test similar like Ray did, just trying it, going out there and seeing how it works, by running a test for a weekend in the context of a product-based business, food product-based business like Ray's, setting up shop in front of a grocery store for a few hours and seeing what people think about the product, is a great way to see not only if the community likes it, but also if your loved one likes it. And then, does the business fit in our community? So, as Tommy said, the car wash works here in Parkland, Florida, where we have about 300 operating days a year, with that aren't real rainouts. In another community like Seattle that has much more rain, it may not work the same, right? So it's the same thing with any business that you see working somewhere, right? It works because of the specific contexts that it's in. So we know that the idea has validation, but we need to test and see if it's going to work in our market. So I can use another example of one of the entrepreneurs that we interview in our new podcast series. Her name is Wendy Coleman, and she founded Katie's Snack Carts. Her daughter Katie is on the autism spectrum, and they've been in the Austin area testing out to see what types of things Katie'd be able to do with her life. And the snack cart was a really great first option because they were able to get it kind of going, very little funds. They actually rented they borrowed an AV cart from the school. They stocked it with different baked goods and different snacks, healthy snacks, and they went to one of their family friends' offices and the church office and started handing out snacks. And what was really interesting about that is they're going out there and seeing what fits in their local market, what snacks are selling. She's found really quickly that paleo type snacks, breakfast type snacks work really well in their market, when a lot of the confectionery snacks, cookies and stuff, they don't work as well. People are gravitating towards having a healthier option that they can't just get out of a vending machine that's fresh. That seems to be the draw, and that's something that they would have never been able to really figure out. They could have done all the research in the world from behind their computer, but they would have never really known it until they went out and tried it. So that's what we're advocating for there. And then here are some different types of tests. We had a whole webinar on this, so I'm going to just kind of breeze through these, but essentially there's two core different types of tests. And your working tests, which are considered a minimum viable product. So essentially, what is the least amount of effort I can do to get my product out there and get real customer feedback? So if I have a kettle corn business or a chocolate business or another type of food product, a farmer's market is a great minimum viable product, right? We can go out, we can set up for the weekend and start getting that product out there and seeing what the customer feedback is. The other type of test is a conversational test. So that would be considered, so that's user research, design research, ethnographic research. They all kind of go by similar terms, but essentially we're trying to get to our customers and understand their needs by talking to them or observing them. So going out and trying to meet with some customers, best place would be to be in their home or wherever they would be using your product, but anywhere we'll do phone interviews work as well, and trying to understand what their needs are by asking open-ended questions and listening. Same thing with your operators. It's the same type of idea that we would want to get to people who, in that case, know about the industry, ask them open-ended questions, and listen.
So here we just have this is kind of an activity that we're not actually going to go through, but if you're thinking about this rapid prototyping and this experimenting through tests, what we'd recommend you do, and depending on the stage that you're in, if you have an idea and you want to see if it works, try and think about something that you can do where you can get it done in the next week, and if you can do it under $500. We understand that there's a lot of inertia in actually getting going and building momentum as far as getting the ball rolling and starting a business. And this is something that we're talking about. We want to determine if it's going to be a good fit. We want to determine if our loved one with autism or individuals with autism can do the work and will enjoy the work, type of thing. We want to do it quickly, we want to do it cheaply, and we want to find out what we can about it. So we recommend choosing one of the prototypes from the toolbox that you saw earlier, and going ahead and using this worksheet where you're trying to think through your assumptions. So we talked about it in the context of two different assumptions that we really have. Is it a good market fit in our community, and can individuals with autism do the work? You're going to outline the tests. So is it going to be a farmer's market, or is it going to be building a quick landing page and you're seeing how many people actually sign up? And you're defining what success means in those tests, right? You want to have certain criteria that to determine whether your assumption was either validated or invalidated. So if we just use Ray as an example, he made $700 over the weekend. Maybe his success criteria was, hey, I want to make over $500. If I make over $500, I think that this thing has legs. So actually defining what it means to be successful in your assumptions will help you determine whether the test is going to work or not. So if you're building a sample landing page, if you define it as getting 20 signups over a 3-day period, then that's one way to determine success or not. So using this prototyping sheet as a resource as you're going out and testing your ideas, we recommend is definitely a best practice to getting your idea off the ground. And alongside that, as you're starting through and thinking through your ideas, we want to call out that it's really important to get people on your team who can fill the knowledge gaps that you might have, right? So getting people that know what you don't know, essentially, and getting them on board and aligning them with your mission, aligning them with your product or service, so that you can ultimately be successful. So when we first started out, we didn't know anything about autism outside of Andrew and his friends, and we didn't know anything about car washing at all. But we knew there were people out there was experts out there who were, so we worked to get them on our team. And I want to call out here that Next week, we're actually going to be doing an in-depth talk about building partnerships and how to go about doing that. So we're going to kind of talk through this relatively quickly. But these are the people that we brought on board. We brought on experts in car washing, and we brought on experts in disability consulting and autism. And, collectively, this team was kind of really able to get us off the ground and to get us, moving to action by, speeding up that learning curve that we had at the onset. Telling us what to look out for, telling us things that were good, not to do, what we should do, and really kind of aligning us with industry standards and disability standards and what was possible. So we just want to call that out here as another best practice. And like I said, next week we're going to have a full webinar on how to actually go about finding these people. What's the best way to reach out to them? How we can go about inclining them in our favor. So one of the things that we talk about, and we're going to talk about it in a second, is leading with quality over the mission. But one of the things that's important when you're developing these partnerships is leading with the mission. What differentiates you from, Joe Schmo car wash up the road? It's your mission. It's that you're doing something different. You're doing something to empower people. So finding ways to really incline them in your favor, finding ways to, do your research on them if they have, if they offered any books or done, particular work that you like, kind of calling that and figuring out ways to kind of incline them and making it easy for them. So finding out ways that you can, set up simple phone conversations where you're choosing certain blocks of time for them where they don't really require any thinking at the onset, where they don't have to, sit there and think, okay, am I going to talk about, the whole way that I started my business from inception or not? Or, are you going to talk about this specific thing that you're encountering at this point in time? And, you're only going to talk about it for, say, a half hour. So, these are just some of the high-level ways that you can go about developing these relationships. We're going to talk about that in greater detail a little bit later. But as you're starting out, testing your ideas and finding people who can really, who know about the product or service or autism, things that you don't know, is going to be really key to the ultimate success of your operation. So to summarize here, in taking action and launching, we're going to test, some of our assumptions through rapid prototyping. We're going to fill our team out with people who have expertise that we don't. And one of the other things that we want to talk about as far as, thinking through who to have on your team, seeing if you can involve multiple family members as well for a variety of reasons. We want to bring on multiple generations to, one, ensure that, we're not doing this alone. It can be very challenging to be, to do this on your own where you're, setting everything up and even if you have key partners on your team, going through operations daily, going through training daily, going through recruiting daily, it can be a lot. So if you have somebody who can, is obviously aligned with the mission, that okay, we're back online. It looks like we just had another quick technical issue. All right. So yeah, we were talking about involving multiple family generations, and that's just another best practice you can do when you are initially setting up your team. You have a clear succession plan. You have somebody else to lean on when you're going through, starting, setting up, and operating your business. So now you're at this kind of, last phase that we're talking about in the autism entrepreneur's journey, and that's actually operating. And we want to talk about operating as far as talking about your business first.
Right. So we want to focus on price and quality in a way that gets our message across that this is not a charity, right? So we're not trying to sell sympathy. We're trying to say that we're employing the best people for the job. Those people have autism, and that's why we're so good. That's also why we're having an impact, right? So we're going to talk about in terms of quality and using that strengths-only language as much as we possibly can. So where do we get that from? Why do we say that? One, we say that for our own personal experience, but we also say that because we have pretty good industry data from the closest proxy, and if you're interested in kind of learning best practices around marketing for your social enterprise, cause marketing in general, one of the best places to go is the sustainability movement, the green movement, because it's been around a lot longer than the disability employment movement has been. It's had a lot more traction to date, but a lot of the elements are pretty similar. So this is an interesting study by Olga Mathers, which is one of the largest public relations and brand marketing firms in the world. And they did this big longitudinal study. I forget exactly how many participants it had, but it had quite a bit. And what they found was that only about 16% of people will buy products and services that are more expensive and lesser quality simply because of the social mission. Very few people. In order to reach the mainstream, which most businesses need to do to be successful, not every business. If you're an art dealer, for instance, you don't need to reach the mainstream. You may only need to sell 2 or 3 pieces a year to live. But most businesses, car wash being one of them, need to reach the vast majority of people in order to be successful. So, how do you do that? If you look at the middle greens here, you're talking about people who are essentially willing to change their behavior to try and support a social mission and try and support a business that's doing better for the environment in this case, but they're only probably willing to spend about an additional 10% premium to do that, and the quality has to be as good or better in order for them to stick with you. That's the sweet spot, right? So we're trying to be price competitive. Doesn't have to necessarily be the same price, but similarly priced to your competition, and as good or better quality. That's how these businesses are successful. That's also probably the best way for us to solve our issues here, right? If we really believe that individuals with autism are extremely capable, which I'd venture to say everybody on this webinar right now does, and the only reason they're not employed is because we haven't given them the chance to do that, the best way to get other people on board is to show that capability, and to do that by providing a really high quality service.
So again, we're kind of at that final, we're actually operating, and as you can see and gather from what Tom had just said, you really want to lead with your product or services quality. That's the first thing that you want to talk about in the value proposition that you offer to your customers. The social mission for your customers is secondary. That social mission will get them in the door. It will get them to try your product or service. But to get that customer to keep coming back and to get them to stay over the long term and to have them be a recurring, consistent customer, you need to have a quality product or service that is price competitive with your competition. So, I mean, we strongly urge you all to, really think through this. The social mission is, really the cherry on top. You want to say, we provide, and one of our slogans that we have on site now is leading with our quality is that, we provide an expert car washing and detailing service, and it's provided by industry professionals with autism. And you can see that that's secondary, right? People are coming in the door continually because they want a clean car, and they're not just doing it for the mission. One of the other things that we want to talk about when you're operating is, we do like to talk about this in the context of creating for-profit businesses, because we do believe that ultimately the for-profit business model is kind of the solution to sustaining the business over the long term. You ultimately want to, when you're running this, is you want to create stakeholder value. And what that means is, one of the business terms in for-profit models is that, they exist to create shareholder value. And what that means is creating value for the owners and founders and, executive team. Stakeholders is everybody who, comes in contact or touches your business. So we want to increase value not only for our owners and ourselves, et cetera, but what we want to do is we want to create value for our employees. We want to create value for our customers. We want to create value for our vendors. So we exist, as social enterprises to, for our mission. We exist to, obviously make a profit so that we can, do this over the long term. But we exist because of our mission, and we exist for our employees, and we want to create value for our employees as, if it's a first job experience, or if they're learning how to, be professional, if they're learning how to, a lot of these different things, we're creating value for them. We're providing real life job skills for them. For our customers, we want to create value in that they're getting a great quality product or service for the cost that they're paying. So, you want to think about creating value not only for, the business owners, but for everybody who comes in contact with the business. And what this last part is talking about a KPI, which is a key performance indicator. And, rather than go in depth in detail about, financial analysis, which is definitely important when you're running your business. One of the things that you're going to want to do is, whatever industry you're in, you want to find key metrics that determine whether your business is going to be successful or not, right? So to give you guys, for instance, some of our key performance indicators that we're looking at in the car wash is we're looking at things like the revenue that's coming in per car, our RPC. We're looking at things like how much chemical is being dispensed per car, our CPC. We're looking at labor continually to ensure that really what these things are doing is ensuring that our costs are all in line, and that the data is going to support decisions that we make for those costs. So the car wash is a very reactionary business. It results in a lot of reactionary demand and volume settings. So who we have on board for our labor pool, we might have a certain number of teams on board. We want our KPI. We want to ensure that our labor is somewhere in the ballpark of 20 to 25% of sales that come in. So to do that, we need to sit there and track and make sure that hour by hour, if the volume isn't there, maybe we need to make cuts, or maybe we need to scale back the hours on a certain team on a certain day, or maybe we don't need the extra help on call on a certain day, and vice versa. Things like RPC. So once you reach a point where your costs are kind of tapped out, and your costs are going to kind of be in line, month over month, week over week, etc. You're going to want to focus on improving the top line. What that means is bringing in more revenue. So we do track things like RPC as well, and that's a great useful tool that we can, we're tracking every single week to make sure that those costs are staying in line, that people aren't just going towards the lowest price service, that a certain percentage of our customers are buying detailing services, and those type of indicators are what helps us get a gauge on the overall financial health of the store. So we would recommend, as you're going through and operating, find industry best standards on things to track, things to look out for. Maybe it's a certain number of your products or services that are selling over a period of time. Maybe it's the average price that you want to look at. But you want to find out as much as you can about what you need to track, and it'll help you make decisions about your business moving forward. So this is a good kind of summary of some of the best practices we wanted to highlight today. Things like starting small and using tests to identify fits for the business, looking for mentorship to fill some of your knowledge gaps and getting partners on board, finding businesses where you can structure the work to be consistent, visual, and concrete, really leading with the quality first over the mission and your value proposition to your customers, and things like involving multiple generations in your business so that you can ensure a clear succession plan as you move forward.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that in that most of these things are general startup best practices with two exceptions. As an autism entrepreneur, the different skill sets that you'll likely use beyond what a normal startup entrepreneur would use would be our really focusing on structure early on in the process of building the organization, and then later on involving multiple generations. So specifically, most startup businesses aren't focused on structure to start. They're focused on just getting to the point where they can make money. You've got probably a couple people doing a million different jobs, and it's kind of chaotic and very fluid. And later down the line, when they get more mature, they'll start to figure out how to build actual processes and procedures. As an autism entrepreneur, that doesn't necessarily work particularly well. It's really important from an early stage to build those visual, structured, and consistent processes, because that's how you'll empower your employees with autism. Without those systems, it's extremely difficult for individuals with autism, most individuals with autism, to be successful in a work environment. And then later down the line, most businesses are generally looking for an exit. They're looking to build something of value and sell it. And that is perfectly natural for most businesses. However, for the types of businesses we're talking about, we're generally trying to provide a long-term value. We're trying to build something that's going to last for someone's lifetime, potentially, provide them with meaningful employment and income for a long period of time. That's different than what most entrepreneurs start with. So one of the reasons why we really talk about building in multiple generations is that allows for that succession. Also building strong culture, so the culture is aligned around driving long-term value and isn't about building something and we're going to sell this in 2 years and everybody's going to make some money. Also very important.
And just as far as some key reflections and insights, we want to talk about businesses that work. So again, using proven business models and making autism a fit within those models is probably going to be the best bet that we can choose as autism entrepreneurs. Testing concepts instead of making assumptions, so not necessarily going with your gut on things and what you think is going to work, actually going out, getting out of the building and testing it with real life customers to see what they think and feel. There's a ton of different opportunities along, as far as risk goes. So, I mean, we talked about starting up a business for, one loved one with Ray, he used $4,000 in personal funds, to John, who committed a significant amount of money to starting up and we're currently employing 35 individuals with autism. So there's a sliding scale of opportunities kind of along the way of how much risk you're willing to accept. What are you willing to kind of commit to your business and how is that going to look moving forward? And, not going at it alone. So one of the key points that we like to make in our workshops is that, we're here to build community. We're here to kind of, lean on each other as resources. Finding other partners that can help you along the way in your industry and, kind of leaning on everybody that you can for, not trying to do this like standalone, I'm the entrepreneur and I did this by myself. Doing what you can to, bring on and involving as many people as you can. So that concludes the content. If you want to stick around and ask questions, we'll open up the chat box in a second. If you're not able to, you can go to risingtideu.com/ask-a-question. This is going to be a cool feature that we use moving forward, as we're going to use it for podcast content as well. So once that podcast launches that we talked about, we're going to answer questions on that podcast from questions we receive here. And if you haven't joined yet, go to facebook.com/group/autism entrepreneurship. It's a great resource and community that we've created for people to kind of spread their ideas on what they're thinking. So I'm going to end the recording here.